Today we're looking at Psalm 71, and I find it a very interesting psalm because it deals with being a believer in your old age. It deals with, in thee, O God, do I put my trust. Let me never be put to confusion. Deliver me in thy righteousness and cause me to escape. Incline thine ear to me and save me. Be thou my strong habitation, wherefore I may continually resort. Thou hast given commandment to save me. He has given commandments to save me. He is coming to save me. He has commanded that he will save me. And here the psalmist is talking about being delivered, and he's looking at God, not his own self and not his friends, to deliver him. And so he says, I am a wonder among many, but thou art my strong refuge. I like what he says here in 9. Cast me not off in the time of old age. Forsake me not when my strength is failing. The idea that he is getting older here. He's becoming an older man, and he's dealing with time passing. And this whole one is a very beautiful psalm that deals with being aged before God and feeling that time is short and seeing that the body is changing, both sometimes good and sometimes not so good. God, be not far from me. Make haste to be my help. That as an older man, he is seeking God for his help. And he's not just seeking society or family, which is okay to have society and family, but he is looking to God. And I love what he says here twice. He uses the terms, I will go in strength of Lord God, of the Lord God, but the Lord God here is Adonai Yehovah. Once again, he's relying on, we're looking at those words, Adonai Yehovah. This is not Yehovah Elohim. Yehovah Elohim, the God who is functioning as the creator God, but here he is the personal God who's also the covenant-making God. So he's calling upon the covenant-making side of God and the personal side of God. And now also, when I am old and gray-headed, O God, forsake me not until I've shown thy strength unto this generation and thy power to everyone that is to come. He's showing the righteousness of God, not his own righteousness. He's showing the power of God, not his own power. So this is a very strong psalm about, again, being aged. But I think a lot of people can read it, can feel what he's feeling. Sometimes when you're aged, you feel a little more helpless. But the truth is we're all helpless to one point or another. Thy righteousness also as God is very high. O God, who is like thee. This is a very worshipful psalm. And so here he is talking, my lips shall greatly rejoice when I sing unto thee, my soul which thou hast redeemed. The idea that he is still singing to his God, even as an older man. And he's showing the righteousness of God and the power of God. So it's again a beautiful psalm and one that it bespeaks righteousness. Sometimes I think the psalms, when you look at 1 through 70 or 1 through 80, I think they're progressive. I think he wrote some of the earlier psalms as a younger man or as a beginning man or as a later teen, maybe in his 18, 19, learning about scoffers and learning about how not to stand in their way. And then he moves on to talking about righteousness and iniquity, it's something that a younger man or a middle-aged man might get into and things. And then he starts dealing with things more of as an older thing as you get into the 70s. I almost think that there's almost 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. It's kind of like being, 19, 20, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. You see a progression of this man through the Psalms. So it's very beautiful to see this, and let's see it for what it is. But this is a very nice psalm and one that I kind of take to heart. Going back to 34, we're dealing with the facts that the Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh have decided they wanted to stay on the east side of Jordan. And of course, Moses is like, well, you can't stay here because you need to go. We're all going to go across Jordan. But they make the deal that, well, our young ones and our cattle and anyone that's not of war age, that's not a warrior, will stay and set up shop. And then we'll go and fight till all the inheritance has been given. Then we'll come back. And Moses agrees to this. So they set that up. And again, I'll show you on this map that I made. Find the correct one here. You'll see that Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh are on this side, the east side of the Jordan. You also notice that they don't get into Edom, Moab, and Ammon are on the farther east. So they do take these lands here, but not the lands of them. These are the lands of the Canaanites on that side. So, and probably Probably also the Midianites were there. So you get the idea that they're going to stay, but they're going to go and fight for the rest of the land. So in 33, we find their trek, you know, how they went down from Sinai and down along the bottom and came up. And really, this is not that far of a walk. Again, using this map, it looks like it's a large piece of land, but you're only dealing with maybe, you know, it's about 200 miles from here to here. So you're dealing about 400 miles, give or take. And across, that's about 100 miles. So again, coming down and across, they were 11 days away from here to Kadesh. That's how close they were. And yet what happens is God puts them, they were so close to taking the land, but he takes them on a roundabout for 38 years, just living in the desert, eating manna and eating quail and eating bullocks and eating sheep, waiting for that generation to die, and then the next generation will be taken in. So we weren't that far away. It's only about 70 miles from Kadesh to Jerusalem. So we're not looking at a large distance. And here they are over on the east side, getting ready to go across to Jericho. They're not that far away. So we have them doing this in 33. In 34, he starts giving the borders, and he starts telling them how far north you can exist, how far south you can exist. Of course, you go against the Mediterranean Sea, and then how far to the east you can go. He isn't just saying, take land. Just start conquering. Just start carving it up however you want to do. Do what you want to do, guys. No, he has a specific plan here, that they will only have the certain area. He promised Abraham the area that Abraham walked. So he's going to give them everything where Abraham has walked. That's the land that they get. Abraham established the border. So he's going to give this to them. And he talks about that border in 36. And he talks about the princes that will exist. He's going to give this land by lot. Again, if you have a larger population, you get a larger area. If you have a smaller population, you will get a smaller area. And you're never, ever to sell these lands out of your tribe. These lands stay forever. You might barter, you might rent the land just before Jubilee or something, but when you come back in the year of Jubilee, that land goes back to the tribe that had it. So again, you may not marry it out. The idea we'll talk about the daughters of Zephalahed, when we talk about how that they can have the land, they were of Manasseh, they could have the land in Manasseh, but if they married out, they would lose their rights to that land, because he didn't want the lands going from tribe to tribe. This would create fighting. The land always belongs to the tribes, and they weren't out conquering just willy-nilly all the other tribes that are around them and moving themselves south into Egypt or farther east into Persia, or what would be Persia, or farther north into what would be Syria. You know, they weren't out conquering, just conquering and taking. They were only given a specific land by God, and they were only given specific lands within that by God. And so this is very structured by God for these people. And he's setting this up, and he calls the names of those who will go, the names of the tribes that will divide the land, and he puts them in 12 tribes. And these are they whom God commanded to divide the inheritance under the children of Israel. It's interesting, he's dividing the inheritance now, but they haven't inherited it yet. They're going to get it when they go in. But we see a lot of structure here. Like I've said, if you go back to Leviticus or part of Exodus and move up to now, you'll see a very fine structuring of this whole thing. It wasn't just willy-nilly. There was a lot of design put into this, a lot of thought put into it by God. You're going to have this type of religion. You're going to have this type of economy. You're going to have this type of laws. You're going to have this type of civil laws. You're going to have these type of trespass laws. You're going to do this because of this and that because of that. If a person does this, you can do this. If a person does that, you can do that. We're establishing Moses and then the men that were under him, under the 10,000s, thousands, and hundreds, and 50s, and 10s, to do justice within the nation. And he's still doing this. And it's very beautiful to see. This is structured. This is not just random. Okay, go take what you want. And you were not allowed to treat the sojourners and the people who are passing through your land as enemies. You weren't supposed to, to enslave anyone. They could be your servant if they wanted to, in voluntary servitude. As, people would make covenants with people. I'll work for you X amount of years for X amount of this or that, and I'll rent your land or you'll rent my land or something. But the idea is they still were very structured. When we see 35, I really like 35 because he's setting up something for the Levites. Remember, the Levites didn't get any land. They were a people without, like a man without a country. But God has established that around cities they would have, it says here that, command the children of Israel that they will give the inheritance, they will give the Levites of the inheritance of their possessions cities to dwell in. And the city shall they have to dwell in, and the suburbs of them shall be for their cattle and their goods. And the suburbs of the cities which you shall give to the Levites shall reach from the walls of the city outward 1,000 cubits. So he's going to give them cities, and they also have 1,000 outside of the 1,000 cubits, which is like 1.5 miles, close to 2 miles, surrounding the city that belongs to them. They can use this for farmland. They use this to grow crops. They use this for, they could live within the cities or maybe set up homesteads out here, but they had this land which was set around the city. And again, many of these cities could have stretched for 3 to 5 miles in one direction and then 3 to 5 miles in another one, and you're giving this extra land around the city to the Levites. So they were provided for that way, so that they might have crops, that they might have homesteads, that they might have lands where they could grow. They were also close to the city, should they go in and need that they needed to go and get to Jerusalem if they needed to do any kind of temple service. So he's setting them up and giving them land. So every city, so you get the idea that that the cities you shall give them to dwell in, the suburbs of them shall be for their cattle, and the suburbs of the cities which you give them to reach, and you shall measure without the city on the east side 2,000 cubits. So he's giving land around the cities. He also creates cities of refuge. Now this is an interesting concept. And you shall appoint cities of refuge that the slayer may flee who killed somebody unaware. The idea that if there was murder, a kinsman could go and seek out the murderer. It was called the Avenger of Blood. And they could go out, if it was proven this person was a murderer, they could go out and basically murder that person. It wasn't free murder, it wasn't, vigilanteism, but there was a sense of again, the family taking care of the family. And so, but if it was by accident, someone killed someone by accident, they set up these cities of refuge that were the Levite cities. And people could go, if I killed somebody by accident, hit them with a stone or hit them with something, or didn't see and dropped something on them or something, and they died, I could go live in the city of refuge until the high priest. When the high priest died, I would be free to go back and go where I wanted. But I had to stay in these special Levite cities all my life. If I stepped out, the Avenger of Blood could come and get me. So he set this up for them to give refuge for people who had sinned innocently. And it was not their fault. It was an accident, but someone dies. And now, to keep the Avenger of Blood away, I'll give 3 cities on the east side and 3 cities on the west side. So he gives 3 cities on one side, 3 cities on the other. And these will be Levite cities. There's within Simeon, within Gad, within Reuben, or within there's places he sets up these 6 cities that are Levite cities of refuge. And so you go into these cities. He said, if you smite someone with an instrument of iron so that he die, he is a murderer, and a murderer will be put to death. But if smiting him with throwing a stone that he might die, he is a murderer. He talks about murderers. The Avenger of Blood himself shall slay the murderer. When he meets him, he shall slay him. But he talks about if it was done by accident, then the man goes or the woman goes into the city of refuge. This is a matter of justice. This is so that we don't become vigilantes. This is so we don't become people who just fight back and forth, killing. The idea of justice is to quell any kind of social injustice. That's why we do need laws that are specific, dealing with cases in a specific way. If someone does murder, and it's proven by 2 or more witnesses, and witnesses were not to lie, God knows if you're lying. And if you lied, you got the penalty that the other person was going to get. If they could prove that 2 of you were conspiring to create a lie so that you could get somebody's land or get something from them, you would be killed. Bearing false witness was also a sin. This is a way to keep the legal framework in place. We used to have this "so help me God" thing that we used to do, putting your hand on the Bible here in America. So he sets up the cities of refuge. You can read about that. But he should remain in the city of refuge until the death of the high priest. And these things shall be a statute unto you throughout your dwellings. So he sets these up in these cities of refuge, which, these cities could have 10 to 12. They could have 1,000, 1,500 people or something. A decent city for these people to go live in until the high priest dies. The last chapter of Numbers is about marriage, and it does talk about what I've said to the daughters of Zephalahed, how you cannot marry outside of your tribe because you will mar your inheritance. You will mess up your inheritance if all of a sudden someone is marrying from Simeon into Judah, and they're taking land from Simeon to Judah. Well, whose land is it? Is it Simeon's or Judah's? And it creates a problem. And he's asking women that if you're in a position of power and you do control land, you can marry anyone among your tribe, but do not leave the tribe. If you do, you just forfeit your inheritance, basically, and you'll become under that man's inheritance. But I like what says something here, about marriage. It says, "This is the thing that the Lord doth command concerning the daughters of Zephalahed, saying, let them marry to whom they think best. Only to the family of the tribe of their father shall they marry." Now, notice these words. Let them marry whom they think best. God is not for arranged marriages. You women, you can marry who you think best. But you just can't marry, in this situation, anyone. You have to respect what God has called. God gave this inheritance to this tribe, and you need to respect the fact that God gave the inheritance to the tribe, and therefore you keep that inheritance within that tribe. But you can marry anyone in that tribe that you like. Just stay within there. And this is only for those who do have the power of holding land, because there are no men to hold land. Men are also supposed to be holding the land for Messiah. All of Israel is holding this because actually the promise is that Messiah will get this land. And they're just holding it for him like a holding place till he gets here. So really the land is Messiah's. So we finish up Numbers just reminding us of this whole thing about we end talking about the inheritance. We end talking about the land. We end talking about how they're going to set it up. It's just not a free-for-all. This isn't like, Oklahoma with the Sooner State where they shot a gun and everybody started taking land. This is structured by God so that everyone it might be fair, it might be balanced, it might have equity, and at the end of the day, it came from God and not from their own strength. So that's Numbers. Tomorrow we're starting Deuteronomy and then into Joshua. So we're going to go back. Deuteronomy might go a little fast because we're going over land that we've already been. So I might go a little faster on that, or I'll have shorter videos. But don't, just because I'm going a little faster, don't not read it, 2 a day or 2 a day. Read 2 a day plus a psalm or plus a poetry book. Then later on, when you're finished with all the poetries, maybe go to 3 a day. It's important that you get this daily reading in a consistent way so that you have a consistent understanding. This, like I've said before, this sprinting to the cross. I want to get to Jesus and all the wonderful things. This is not a foot race. Again, evidentiary Christianity is about looking over the grid work, seeing what's there under glass, discerning what you're seeing, weighing the whole thing as you're going. It's like having a giant glass work that you're just going and looking and seeing what's down there and telling others what you're seeing and how it's connected to what you've seen and how it will be connected to what you will see, if you've read the whole Bible like this. When we tinker with it, we destroy it. We need to be careful how we deal with scriptures. Picking them out and just putting them on a page. I want all the love, so I'll get all the love scriptures. I'll get all the peace, I'll get all the peace scriptures. If I took apart a car and said, I have the wheels over here and I have the struts over there, and look, I stacked the spark plugs over there, I can't use the car. It's in pieces. The value of a car is in how it's all put together and how they work together. So just taking the pieces of the Bible in a topical study doesn't give you anything. The power of love in the scripture is how it fits as a component. You could think of it as a motherboard. If you start taking circuits out and stacking all the love circuits over here, well, that love circuit fits around how it works with the circuits around it. Don't take the circuits out and stack them in a corner and say, look, I've studied love. No, you haven't. because you study love by leaving it in the circuit board, and then every time you see it, you see how it's related to the situation. So let's step away from conclusionary Christianity with just beads on a string, and let's look with grid work and evidence and see what the Bible really says. Thank you.